and technology, hopefully still some to come. I am Dave McCaughan. Welcome to this lead talk from Marketing Futures, which is a little collective that my friend Faiyaz and I put together with our friend Zulfikar, who is sitting in Toronto, freezing at the moment. But he's not joining us live at the moment. But Marketing Futures has been around for a couple of years. It's basically a small team where we try to help companies with some training and some advice on where marketing is going, marketing training, etc. Get in touch with us if you want some help. We've been doing this series of lead talks. Last year they were live lead talks in Dhaka. This year, for different reasons, we can't do live lead talks anymore. So we've been doing these virtual ones and on different themes. And today we're going to talk about where we think creative is going now, and then as the lessons we're learning out and coming out of this whole COVID crisis. So, Faiyaz, do you want to introduce our two guests, and hopefully our third guest will join us in a little while?
Okay. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you, Shaon bhai. Thank you, Casey, for joining in. And we would be expecting Jeremy also. So as Dave has given an introduction of Marketing Futures, and we have been doing it, and today I would say this is the 7th or the 8th event which we are having, and pretty excited to share the screen with all of you here. So let me give a little introduction of our guests actually. So we have got Dave McCaughan. Dave McCaughan is basically the co-founder of Marketing Future, and he is also the Chief Strategic Officer of AI Agency, who has got an experience of more than 2 decades as senior roles with McCann World Group, a master in strategic planning and consumer insights. We have got Gousul, Syed Shaon, who is basically known as the guru of creative in Bangladesh and is currently the managing partner and country head of Grey Bangladesh. Shaon is the person who led Grey to win Bangladesh's first major Cannes Awards in recent years. And that's why we all call him the guru of creative in Bangladesh. We have got Kaniska Chakraborty, who is popularly known as Casey, a brand and communication professional, worked extensively across SAARC region in advertising, research, and management. Dhaka has been his second home, and in many cases, first home too. But his heart family lies in the world of food. So this is the introduction. We've got another person who will be joining us very soon, who is Jeremy Perrot. Jeremy is Sydney-based and currently the executive creative producer of Blackfish Communications Australia. With 30 years of experience, Jeremy is best known for his years as leading the creative for McCann Healthcare globally, which he turned into the most award-winning specialist agencies in the world. So here you go, Dave.
Okay. Hopefully Jeremy can join us in a bit. What we wanted to talk about today was, we've had, I think every one of us has been on different sessions in the last 3 months where we've talked about, I know Shaon is like on a session every second day, it seems to me. Like every time I switch on Facebook, his face is on some webinar, right? And we're all getting asked a lot of stuff about how people react right now. But one of the things that's interesting is, after 3-4 months of this around the world, 3-4 months in where I'm living here in Thailand or, in India, Bangladesh, and we're hearing all this stuff about the new normal and about how things are being changed. And it's certainly true that the fact that we've had 3-4 months, depending where you live, locked in, working from home, not being able to do a lot of the normal sort of communication, the normal sort of advertising, a lot of brands being affected, a lot of businesses being affected, and unfortunately some businesses closing down because of this, that it's maybe time to start thinking about, well, what's the longer term effect of this in terms of creative, right? I mean, I noticed a few things, the last 24 hours, I guess everybody that's watching this has been swamped with the news that Unilever and Coca-Cola have decided, not because of COVID, but because of the tension in the world today and the Black Matters issue in America and a whole bunch of other things, they've said, oh, okay, no Facebook for a while. We're going to remove ourselves from Facebook, or or social media in general. I mean, I think that's still sort of a bit unclear what each company is doing, and of course that's affecting the stock price of Facebook, etc., and a lot of changes. But I mean, part of that is the fact that the tensions that are building up because of COVID are making every other tension much worse. I think the thing that we've seen in coming out of America, and then the way in which so many parts of the world are joining into the Black Lives Matter sort of situation, the way in which this is sort of brought to the surface again, the whole thing that we saw last year with the environment and Greta Thunberg and stuff like that, and so we're suddenly in 2020 in a world full of so much tension and having to do things so differently that surely, and having to buy things differently. I mean, we've talked on other podcasts, all of us in different combinations, about the dramatic increase in online purchasing, in the way in which so many of us are now thinking nothing of buying stuff online that we didn't really buy much of before. Shaon, I remember a couple of months ago on a session that Shaon and I were on together, and you made the really great point at the time that, well, let's not forget that all of this face masks and home, they're working from home, that's great for the four of us, but for a huge number of people in Bangladesh, India, Thailand, Asia in general, it's an impossibility, right? But people have had to adapt in different ways. And one of the interesting debates for me has been that when this all first started, we saw big companies everywhere doing pretty anemic, oh, we're with you, we're going to help you, we're going to fight for you type messaging. But you can't keep on just doing that, right? You can do that when it first starts, but for a start, after three months, wait, we get that. But what are you really doing? Or, but I have to buy stuff. I'm still going to live, right? I'm still going to do things. And so I'm still starting to think about the way in which that might be affecting the way in which creative agencies, clients, think about their messaging going forward, and what does all this mean? So, I warned you guys I was going to ask you the question. So maybe my good friend Shaon, maybe you can start off with what do you give us your opinion.
Thank you so much for inviting, because I think I always feel very comfortable when the one kind is together. Our kind is together. We all are in advertising, have done our part in own sweet ways. When I was in Unitrend and you were in McCann, then we worked a bit. So with Casey, of course, I spent a lot of time with Faiyaz as well for Pulse days, Faiyaz. But frankly, David, for Bangladesh, one big insight is very interesting. And it's very interesting that how times are changing. Even 3 months back we talked about stay home. Now you're telling that we cannot stay home. So now what is the new normal? So discussion from stay home to new normal is within 3 months' time. It's that dynamic right now. So and then as I mentioned, that for some of us it's a luxury really, to talk like this on internet, sitting here comfortably in your AC room and then having good food and all, kind of a relaxing time, thinking about things and how things will change and shape up. But for mass, it's really difficult in our part of the world. People don't know how to handle their lives. They don't know what to do. And then I was thinking, I was seeing those rickshaw pullers in Dhaka, and I'm thinking that wearing those masks, and mask actually will not allow you, it hinder oxygen supply by 30%. 30% oxygen doesn't get, you get lesser, 30% less oxygen. And it's, so when I walk in the street with my wife at around 9:30, 10, with wearing those masks, it's so difficult for us to walk. I was thinking that how those rickshaw pullers really pull rickshaws with masks. But sitting here, we say that, look at those guys, they're not really maintaining this mask and all, but we don't really feel what really goes through. But having said all of this, Bangladesh, one insight which I really find very powerful, very collective subconscious, which is that we are extremely good at managing our crisis, but we are really bad at managing our successes. That's very true about Bangladeshis. We are very good at managing our crisis. Right now we are in crisis, and you'll see we'll be one of the few countries in the world will will really come off it much faster than others, because we are good at managing crisis. So we are in a crisis right now. I think Bangladesh manages better, and increasingly, if you ask me as an agency guy, advertising agency guy, I'm seeing that compared to a month back, the business is actually improving for me. Suddenly, I'm seeing there are new pitch briefs are coming in, new campaigns people talk about. Of course, for some categories, it's more true. For telecom or internet or MFS, mobile financial services, or digital health, or essentials, the milk, the sugars, those are going fine actually. And some interesting new categories are also coming in. And every time, everywhere, wherever we are going, I'm just telling this to everybody that actually, after many years, suddenly the context is actually in the foreground. Context is genuinely the foreground. Usually you put that in the backdrop and you're happy about it. But suddenly for advertisers, creative guys, for script writers, for writers, for messagings, for art directors, this context is so powerful right now. So anything you do, whether it's a condom advertising or a domestic violence campaign, if your context is huge, your context is so important, and because we're not in that habit, you are forgetting that sometimes, and you said, no, I cannot write like this. People will not even look at my TV commercials if I'm not very aware of my context, if I'm not putting that COVID context in action. If in my storytelling, in my act, in my digital campaign, I have to keep that in mind, even for a category where directly COVID is not really very important, even for them. So I think that is one thing which has become very, very important right now for us whenever we are writing, whenever we are presenting our scripts, when we are discussing strategies. The context has become very, very powerful. So how to really...
I'll just tell you an interesting example of that. I can't remember which podcast or which webinar thing I mentioned this on, but when this all first started in Bangkok, where I lived locked down, I had one of the weirdest experiences of my life, because I had to go to the bank, and I couldn't just go to the ATM. I actually had to get a certificate from a bank, a signed certificate, for some business reason, right? So I had to literally go in the branch and I walked in the branch with a mask on, with me and my wife, and we both had masks on. And I had that odd feeling, because as I walked in the branch, every single person inside the bank had a mask on. And it was that moment of, for the first time in the history of mankind, if you didn't wear a mask when you walked in a bank, you were in trouble. If you think about it, 6 months before, if I'd been in any city in the world and I'd walked in a bank with a mask on, somebody would have tried to shoot me, right? Yeah. Now, but the weird thing was, I was saying before we came online, I was in a studio this week for a client who was shooting a commercial here.
Okay.
But while I was in there, somebody else from the studio was saying that they were working with a bank here in Thailand who was editing a new TV commercial. And the odd thing was that nobody had masks on. And somebody at the studio has said, but that's not realistic. Because they were talking about great service, and they had a bunch of people behind desks with smiling faces. And it's like, but that's not true. If you go into a bank and they're all sitting there without a mask on, you get worried now, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Absolutely, right?
Absolutely.
So good service is covering your face. It's not, it's not being able to see the good-looking person behind the desk smile, right?
Anymore.
And so you raise a very good issue. It doesn't matter what the category is.
Right.
Context matters now, right?
Oh yeah, big time. In fact, not only that, Dave, very interesting, just your bank story, somebody was saying that if the whole generation for next 5 or 10 years keep wearing masks, nose might get into a private part. Then suddenly, if you don't wear those, it's turned into private parts. So but
so we're gonna have nasal pornography. Is that what you're saying? Or
No, but
the world is
frankly,
changing, my friend.
yeah, and frankly speaking, but having said that, I, I was discussing with somebody. I think very it'll be very controversial to say this, but I think COVID has done more good than bad. If you ask me, it might sound a bit philosophical, maybe a bit controversial, but frankly speaking, the good things when I was counting today morning that what are the good of COVID has done to us. It's amazing. How
Even
people
the awareness, the hygiene awareness,
correct.
you
No,
mean
no,
all those
also,
things, right?
yeah, people have become more human. People
And
suddenly
people,
start
the
thinking.
closeness with
You
family,
think,
the closeness with near and dear ones.
correct. Environment.
Yeah.
How you're coming close to your people without being coming close, literally
And I was
close to
talking
them.
to a food fanatic, food
Yeah.
blogger friend of mine who said a very important point. He said that as a food blogger, he used to suffer from gastritis quite often. He used to eat out. In the last 3 months, his gastritis is gone because he's
God,
eating in.
God, because you're eating at
He's not
home.
he's not popping pills. He's eating in. He's cooking and eating in. So that's another positive side. People are eating healthy because they're cooking themselves. They're not depending on. Unfortunate for the restaurant industry, yes, because most of the restaurants are shut out. Some are barely surviving. But it's true that in general, people are actually a little healthier. Mentally, I don't know, but physically, yes.
Yeah, somebody just described it in an article I was reading the other day as it's the big break. 2020 is the big, and he meant break as in BRAKE, right? As in the brakes in your car.
Yeah.
And it's basically, it's sort of interesting because last year, because of I guess Greta Thunberg and then the stuff she started, there was that huge debate last year about the environment and all that sort of sustainability. But really, it seems so hard to make a difference last year, right? So hard. How we get it, but what are we going to do? And this year, sort of the world was forced to change things. And yes, unfortunately, as you point out, Shaon, and we've all talked about this separately, for a lot of people, it's a very tough change. But in a sense, as communities, in some ways, sort of, I see what you mean by it's a sort of good change as well. I mean, I know we see all those half joke things about horizons in cities, and hey, you know what? We can actually see the other side of the city. We can actually see the mountains in the distance, or whatever, right? And it's that sort of. I mean, of course, I'm an old guy. You guys are middle-aged guys. Whatever.
Thank you.
For our kids, but if you think about it, for our kids, even my kids are in their 20s, right? But they grew up in big Asian cities, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Tokyo, stuff like that.
Right.
They live down in Sydney now, but even now in Sydney, the mountain range that's sort of about 90 kilometres west of the Harbour Bridge in Sydney, for the first time now, you can see that clearly every day. Right, I could when I was a kid, but growing up and going back home, they've never been able to see that, right? And you see this everywhere, and so I guess in the short term, it's a good reminder of, you might call it the old days, but it's also a simple life, as Casey says. It's people learning or exploring to cook better, maybe healthier eating. Maybe it's just a simple act. I think, Shaon, you mentioned it before. It's the simple act that because we're not going out so much, we're spending a little bit more time just sitting back and thinking, and having to think about life and about what's important, and maybe not having to get out. But how do you guys, KC, come please, how do you guys see this affecting, the communication that's happening? As you say, you've got to put the context of now on it. But how do you see this affecting things now and in the foreseeable future in terms of the way in which we communicate stuff?
I think the way it will leave an indelible mark on all of us communication-wise, and also on us professionals, on people like Shaon who are actively creating communication. It is a very strong reminder of how fragile we are. I think we will be good to keep that in mind, that we are a very fragile society, and the more compassion we show towards each other, probably it'll be better for all of us. I think some of the big companies are showing the way. Some of the companies like a Unilever or even a Nokia or a Procter is showing the way on how to do it. It's not just lip service; it's actually getting down and doing the dirty work for the consumers, and taking that extra effort to reach that one extra sachet of shampoo or that one extra soap to the last consumer. I think that's a very important step. And I think the communication, the way we used to communicate, and Shaon and I have done this many times, is talk about the end consumer benefit. I think the end consumer benefit is changing very rapidly. The end consumer benefit is moving towards health and hygiene, and not just another social confidence or another cultural confidence or a brighter smile or a happier morning. Those will remain, but I think a bigger part of that would be health and hygiene, nutrition. How do we keep better? How do we stay well? How do I keep my loved ones stay safe and happy? It's not just happy anymore; it's safe and happy. I think that's a new dimension that's going to be added. That is already added to communication. That safety. In more ways than one. It's not just physical safety, it's your health, your mental health, your physical health. How do you take care of that is going to be a big part of communication going forward. And also the other thing I see, it's a very heartening thing for me, is the use of humor, because everybody wants to feel good at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who you are. You may not want to look good, but you certainly want to feel good. And when I say humor in content, I really like that. I'll give you an example, a small example. Memes are all over the place. People actually have more time and they're creating lots and lots of memes. One caught my attention, and I think it's a brilliant meme. And it said that the entire John Lennon International Airport is under quarantine with everybody in it. And the next line said, imagine all the people. That was outstanding. That was absolutely mind-blowing, creative. And that is, like I said, I was talking to Faiyaz, and I said that creativity is around us. I think we strive too hard to look for it. And I honestly think creativity is far beyond our scope of work. The world is teaching us how to be creative. I actually asked Faiyaz that, I bet you anything you're wearing shorts under this beautiful shirt, collared shirt, and I'm wearing shorts. And nobody taught me to do this. It came naturally. That is creativity. That is how we are adapting. Adaptation and adoption are the two parents of creativity. That's how you become creative. Necessity. Yeah, that's where we are going towards. And necessity of the day.
I'll give you a simple example. I'm obviously maybe not in Dhaka and Calcutta at the moment, but Bangkok has been opening back up a lot in terms of, and a lot of offices have started, but really July 1st they're going to start going back to work, right? At the same time, as I said, my 2 adult kids live in Sydney, and they're now going back to work next week, back to the office again. It's opening up, at least as of today. We'll see what happens, who knows, right? But what's really interesting is when you look at those big cities where things are starting to open up again, is the debates that are coming out of this about simple things like, okay, but we work from home pretty efficiently for 3 months. Like, why do we need to go back to the office, right? Are we going back to the office mostly for social reasons as opposed to efficiency reasons? And quite often it's not an efficiency reason. Hey, I just see Jeremy. Can you hear us?
Hi, Jeremy.
Jeremy's here.
Hello.
Hi, Jeremy.
Everybody watching, listening, Jeremy, Perrot, and I go back 30 years. We worked together in Japan for about 7 years. We worked together for the McCann group for about 25 years.
Oh, my God.
When he used to have a beard, the same as mine, unfortunately, we used to get mistaken for each other or for brothers. But thank God he's now decided to shave it off. So there is some separation. And the weird thing was, we'd known each other for about 5 or 6 years, and then in a bar one night, we got talking about stuff and discovered that our grandfathers came from basically the same street in Belfast. So we had to worry whether or not we were actually illegitimately relatives.
You never know.
You never know.
It sounds like a Bollywood movie script.
I swear, man. so much
Not Lost Brothers.
Bombay movie, man. Bollywood film.
Yeah, exactly. Hey,
too
Jeremy,
much information, mate.
yeah, sorry about that, mate. Sorry. We're just talking about the way in which, the events of the last few months are affecting the way in which creative is going. And, I personally, Faiyaz and I wrote an article a little while ago about, what I call the fact that we go through this sort of help, hope, and hygiene stages. At the first stage of a crisis, we have all these ads where all these companies come out and say, we're with you, we're going to help you, and all that sort of stuff. And then it follows fairly quickly into sort of let's pull together and hope for the future. But I always said, right, what you also see is there's a need for what I called hijinks, but that was more just to make it all connect as a headline. But like we were talking about the fact that humor comes into play, that, you need at some point in all these things, you can't have 3-4 months of just being solemn, being serious, being solemn, being serious. Somebody's got to sort of lighten the tone a bit after a while. Otherwise, we're all going to start shooting ourselves, regardless of the disease or whatever, right? So, I mean, Jeremy, just, we were talking about this yesterday or the day before. So just, how are you feeling about the way in which creative is sort of like evolving during the course of what's happened the last few months?
Well, I think you actually hit on a fairly topical point. All the communication right now looks exactly the same. And it's as boring and as mind-numbing as it can possibly be. And if you do turn the sound down on 99% of this stuff, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's the same crap. And so from an industry that's supposed to be breakthrough, mold and horizon setting, we're not doing a very good job. And so what I would say is I get great relief from watching all the DIY stuff on YouTube, because I think some of the geniuses are sitting at home who've never been discovered and are putting out content that just lighten up everybody's life. And much to the way big brands, and I won't mention them because it's not fair, but big brands in beverage or big brands in tech would scour YouTube, 5-6 years ago, earlier even. And if they found something cool, they'd go away and remake it, thinking that was the way to connect. But really what YouTube is the community or global community of conversation and people putting out their stuff that they find entertaining. And so I don't want to divert away from your conversation or the topic, but in this world right now, and Australia is about to go into its second wave. Victoria has had about 30 cases overnight.
Yeah.
But, this is going on all over the world. You either take a gun out and shoot yourself in the face, or you sit back and take stock of what's around you. And looking at the work that was on YouTube a little while back, there some wonderful pieces of young filmmakers doing stop-to-take animation. I remember seeing one guy who was had the camera mounted on the roof of his bedroom, and it looked like he was skiing up a mountain. He was actually just in his skis in his bedroom, and he made sheets and sheets. But he had the whole world riveted. And I just loved watching the engagement figures of people who are clicking in from all around the world and communicating. Yeah. And it always makes me smile, because down here in the groundswell, in the trenches, in the vocabulary and conversation of normal everyday people, this stuff's going on. And in the corporate world, 12 layers above the skyline, the cloud line, just before you get to the stratosphere, are all the dickhead corporations thinking they're doing the right thing, saying the right thing, talking the right thing, and actually missing the planet completely.
Absolutely.
So my comment would be, we shouldn't take ourselves so seriously, but my comment would be community. And Dave and I were talking before and sharing some anecdotes from back in the days in Japan, and when he was in Thailand, I was in Korea. The farmer out in the middle of nowhere, and he doesn't even have a tractor, and if he did, it would be an engine-powered thing with little traction things to get the wheels turning, but he's still working the paddy field right out in the middle of nowhere, still has a mobile phone. And that mobile phone connects him, whether it's stick figures and hieroglyphics or content, which you can only purchase because he's watching a soap for $1 a day, to a community. his mates, his friends, his relatives, and more importantly, the people that he relates to. And that's where the messaging sits in. And I think that's fantastic. And that, to me, is where the real art of creativity has to sit, because it's connecting everybody with community and relative information on their terms for them to understand and for them to absorb and reiterate or talk to others about. It is that community feeling, I think, which is the epitome of social media. And when you start getting clever with TikTok and all the rest of the cool things coming in, it isn't so much the technology, it's what's going on. It gets back to the age-old comment of, what's the idea?
Oh, yes. Oh,
yes. The idea come alive. So that, I hope that sort of answered the question, Dave, without rambling too much.
No, I think you're right.
In fact, Jeremy, I completely agree with you. In fact, we were talking about even Dave asked the same question, that what's happening in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. I was telling them that at a mass level, this whole idea of, how getting scared and getting panicked is the bigger issue than anything else. So, and how, ignorance or knowing less is a bigger trouble rather than, and also at the beginning, there's so much of overload of information. They don't know what to pick from that whole lot. So much of information, everybody is giving you something or the other, that this is true or that is false, you don't know. And in that whole chaos, people actually got more panic than any solution.
That's because
I think we love the idea of panic. Sorry.
No, my apologies, but there's a lot of falsehood. There's fake news is a big phenomenon today. Fake news, I guess, is big money as well, because people don't know how to separate wheat from chaff on that one, and keep on reading these things and on in a capsulated headline, and people panic. For example, in India, in West Bengal, the state that I am speaking from, has seen 15,000 recorded cases. 15,000 cases. What they don't read is 11,000 has been discharged, and there has been 4,000 existing cases which are being treated. But that 15,000 figure sticks to people's mind. People panic. I agree with you, Shaon. I think there's a bit of lack of perspective that's happening around us. There is a bit of perspective from media also, who are not portraying the right picture. Sorry, I think I'm deviating. I should not do that.
No. But it's incredible. It's incredible. While this horrific thing is going on around the world, the media actually has taken a very responsible role and has been very irresponsible in that role. And doing that, I don't know how many people have woken up yet, but ISIS seems to have disappeared. The Yemeni genocide seems to have almost gone away.
Yeah.
Poverty.
Nobody even talk about it.
Nutrition.
Nobody talks about it.
It's incredible how the world's cured itself.
Well, that's true. It's taken. Unfortunately, the news media focuses on one thing, and and it's like, well, that's the thing now, right? But one of the things you said, Jeremy, just reminded me of the fact that about 4 or 5 days ago, Vera Lynn died. So, for those of us that had parents that fought in World War II, like mine, Jeremy's, etc. That was a huge moment. I grew up in a household where I had to listen to Vera Lynn songs from the 1940s, whether I liked it or not. And so it was a sad day when I heard she died, because she was my father's favorite singer and all this stuff. But what it really reminded me of was a very simple historical fact. In the history of broadcast or film, radio, media, right? So go back 100, 120 years. We know that every time a country has a major crisis, what people like to listen to, watch, dance to, play around to is lighter content. They like musicals. You can actually track the history of musical movies, and their popularity is always at the times of deepest economic difficulties, of war, of crisis. That basically it's human nature that when times are really tough, we look for distraction.
Yes.
And we look for somebody to try to lift the spirits. Now, Vera Lynn in 1940 England lifted the spirits of a nation, right? Meaningless to most of the world today, I know. But if you think about it and go back over time, and in your own history of your own countries, wherever we are, we know this is true. That it's always that the rise of some comedian, the rise of some new form of goofy music, or bands that oh my God, what is that about? Oh yeah, but it's fun, right? And what I find really difficult is at the moment is that as Jeremy says, fortunately today, because of YouTube and I guess Facebook and social media in general, a lot of people have access to informal channels that allows them to find something to distract themselves with, something to find some fun videos, whatever, right? So we're not reliant on 3 stations on broadcast television and going to the movies anymore. But it's strange to me that it's very difficult to get advertisers and clients to understand that part of their job, not every advertiser, but Shaon, you've worked with brands. Jeremy and I have worked with brands. I'm sure we've all worked with lots of brands, and you go, guys, your job in life is to make people feel better, not make them depressed.
So true.
I find this whole debate about brand purpose interesting, because there's a lot of brands in the world that their real purpose was just making you feel good. Really,
important.
And yet they're struggling to do that now. They're really trying to be too serious about things, and people need that balance. Of course, we need people to tell us what to do. We need the messaging about being careful and how to wash your hands, and but we also need a bit of a laugh. We need to dance a little bit, right? So
I think actually a lot of times, clients forget that actually clients actually don't want to communicate for their consumers. Clients actually want to communicate for themselves. That is the biggest trouble. Most of the time, they don't understand that they need to communicate for their consumers. One day they believe that that they understand consumers, and that's their understanding, not consumers' understanding. So that's one trouble. I always found that, finally,
which is the root of it, because I don't like it.
I don't like it. That answer of I don't like it. Consumer won't understand.
Yeah,
how do you know consumer won't understand? Consumer won't like it.
Jeremy and I were sort of joined at the hip for about 6 years there. We spent every day, I think every day for 6 years, just sitting through endless meetings for endless clients. And basically the mumbling in the taxi back from all these client meetings was always the same thing you're just saying, right, Jeremy? It was always about, but that's not what really people care about, right? That's the client wanting to get across, we're 2% heavier, or we're 3% less expensive or something. But realistically,
and also they're very interesting that, many a times the clients of the brand guys, they forget that how little role that brand plays in consumers' life. And appreciating that smallness is very important. Appreciation of that not so important, I'm not so important in consumers' life, is very important. In the larger scheme of things, a toothpaste is only about 30 seconds in the morning. You need to realize that. Nobody make that toothpaste.
I once did a piece of research in Australia, and we estimated for a toothbrush brand, right? And we estimated that the average Australian family of mum, dad, and 2 kids in a whole year spent a total of 7.5 minutes thinking about their toothbrush.
Just tell me that. Exactly. Nobody make that toothpaste. Yeah, nobody make that toothpaste tube as a side pillow at night and sleep with it. It doesn't happen like that. Come on. It's just else. So many brands forget that. The role in the life, the largest scheme of things, how small is my role? I think that's very important to make you humble as a brand manager or a client, and to approach it accordingly as a part of that life.
I get it. Yeah.
That's trouble.
There is a lot of defense mechanism that goes in with clients, saying that I have to defend my job, I have to justify my existence, therefore I must do something, and that there's this lust for eternity. I must do something that's lasting. You don't really have to. Just do a few things well. You don't have to. Like, I think one of Dave's speeches I attended about a year or two back, which talked about, there are no big ideas anymore. And I completely take to heart. And everybody's running after the next big idea. There aren't any. And you are missing out on some wonderful small ideas which you can make big later on. So, that's part of the problem in, at least in our part of the world. I don't know how the Western world is working. I don't know how Australia is working. Certainly in the Indian subcontinent, that's a big issue. And every brand manager who comes in new on a brand wants to change everything and stamp his authority on the brand, which is also a huge problem. Everything that has happened so far can't be bad and should not be thrown away, maybe with the bathwater syndrome, in my mind. So yeah, that's where we are. But I take Jeremy's point. I completely agree with the fact that humor must be played up in whatever communication we do, whatever narrative we do. I think humor would play a huge role going forward because positivity is needed. I was talking before Jeremy joined us. I was talking about memes and how wonderful they're and how wonderful I feel when I come across a good meme, and I get a great laugh out of it. I keep on forwarding stuff to people with memes and things like those, and these are lovely stuff. And these are unbranded. They are not branded. Why isn't the brand picking them up? I have no idea. But they actually lighten up the day. If you're going to be on social media and if you're looking for stuff to like, on YouTube, you're probably consciously looking for something to watch, a recipe or how to do something, DIY, etc., etc. But if you're on a Facebook or on an Instagram, you're mindlessly scrolling down and scrolling up, and you're hitting onto something that's making you pause. More often than not, if it's not a celebrity news, it's a meme. Which is in smart things which you already knew, but puts in a new perspective altogether. And I think that's wonderful. I think communication needs to adapt that.
Oh, yeah.
And Jeremy.
Well, we're going to jump in about 5 times now. So I think I might just get out of the swimming pool and just run down the other end and jump in at this point. About 50 years ago for Dave and I, because you guys are much younger, advertising had a particular role, and it was there to inform, and it had a prestige about it. We were brands' best friends. We were clients' most desired partner. The word partner's gone, and the word service has come in.
Yes.
And in that time, from when we started advertising, when we were seduced by the Doyle Dane Bernbachs and the BBDOs and for other names, whatever country you're in, you came in because the work was just stunning and you wanted to be part of it. And you were part of an industry that was communicating and having an audience that loved what the next TV commercial was going to be like, or what the next big 96 sheet billboard was going to be, or what celebrity was going to represent their brand. And those days have slipped away, and a whole new generation's come in. And with that generation has come an influx of incredibly powerful technology. I remember Dave and I celebrating some guy in Tokyo turning 100 and wondering, shit, I wonder what that guy thinks, because he's been around 100 years. And he came from Okinawa, but in 100 years, what would he have seen? I mean, he's even seen the first guy go to the moon. He's seen TV being invented and turned to color, and now it's seeing 3D. I mean, this guy has seen a lot in 100 years, let alone what the average guy sees in 60 years. So I guess what I'm trying to get to very quickly without wasting time is the new generation is here, and an influx of powerful technology, just as we're communicating on screens, Zooming and whatever else that we're doing to talk to each other, has replaced the telephone. So has the way to communicate. And our brands have no longer become the iconic brands in the cupboard. A can of baked beans used to expect you to buy them and put them in bulk in your cupboard in the pantry, and the wife to make sure she had enough of them for the family. A beverage company would expect you to choose them top of mind as soon as you get thirsty, and so on and so on and so on. Those days have now rapidly disappeared because now the new generation is here and they want their products on their terms. Millennials will be the future and are beginning to become the future. So be careful with that, because a very smart millennial is 30, not 18. So what a 15-year-old is going to deliver in 15 years, God only knows. But while this generation is coming forward, choice is no longer a brand's expectation. We've always said brands are emotional, and now they have to have they really must have a reasonable a very much passionate role in the lives of these people. Kids will now search out a product, not for the name. I'm wearing a $2,000 scarf, chaps. What do you think? I've got a rash on me because I'm allergic, but it's a $2,000 scarf. Those days are gone.
Yeah.
This is now hemp.
You raise a really good point. You raise a really good point, Jeremy. I don't want to lose it. There's something Jeremy just said I don't want to lose, right?
Sorry?
There's something you just said that I don't want to lose. If you take around the world, and particularly, let's take Bangladesh as a center, right? I can't remember the exact number, but there's a huge portion of the population that's under 30, right? So whatever it is, Faiyaz, remind me, is it like 60% of the population's under 30 or something, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, then what's happened is that the last 4 months, if you put that in context, that's a big chunk of their lives. I mean, if you're a 20-year-old girl in Bangladesh, 4 months is a lot of your conscious life, right?
Yes, big time.
And so, again, the five of us, the youngest of us is middle-aged, right? So Jeremy and I might be just the later end of middle-aged. But the point is, for us, we've seen a lot, and for us, it's been impactful. But Jeremy raises a good point. For younger generations, particularly in marketplaces like Bangladesh, we really have to think about how is the events of the last 4 months and what they've seen going to impact the way in which they interpret advertising and brand messaging in the future. I think Jeremy's dropped out again, so he'll come back. But what do you guys think?
Dave, for me, it's very interesting. It's an old insight, but I think it makes a lot of sense that this offline, online, there's no separation. So that's very, very interesting. It used to be separated, offline life and online life. Now it's overlapping each other.
Remember when we used to talk about above the line and below the line?
Yeah.
And then we worked out that's gone. And now it's offline, online. What does that mean?
It's contextual. That shift of online and offline is so smooth that it's part of the same quantum. It's not a separate quantum anymore. It's like the same quantum that you're online and offline, and it's okay. I remember a very interesting personal story. My brother-in-law used to stay in London, and he had his first kid, in London, and for some reason, for visa issue, my mother-in-law couldn't visit the kid when the kid was coming to the world, and then after 2 years, when that kid first met her grandmother, it looks like they know each other for the last 2 years, and then we realized that every day they saw each other actually in video call. so there is no first time seeing that emotional moment, but I'm seeing my granddaughter for the first time in last 2 years. Nothing, because you have seen each other so much every day that you haven't never felt that you don't know each other. So sometimes it's very interesting that how online offline has become so smooth, so that shift time doesn't matter anymore. It's okay. That's one. Secondly, so that actually has made this generation so okay with the situation that okay, fine, we are not meeting each other, but then we have seen each other, we have talked to each other, we know each other. Number one. Number two, I think it's everywhere in the world, but in Dhaka as well. I'm seeing. I'm very surprised that in Dhaka it's the scene, which is everybody loves a brand which is more socially responsible. This is absolutely clear to my eyes. It used to call it CSR, and I think CSR is such a bullshit of a word. I really hate that word, CSR.
Yeah.
What is CSR? Your business itself is a CSR. You're part of the society. You're doing something for the society, and you're selling something for somebody's good, somebody's need. It's a CSR. So I think in that context, it has gone even one extra mile where everybody loves that brand more, which is more responsible socially. And it's very clear, Dave, in Dhaka. I have
a point of view on this, Shaon. My point of view is, it's a very politically correct thing to love a brand which is showing a lot of social responsibility, quote unquote, I would say. I don't know if that's a true love for the brand. If you actually force someone to choose a brand, I don't know if they'll choose that brand because of the whatever CSR that the brand carries through. I think people have become a little more transactional these days because the life is like that. I think they'll be choosing a brand amongst a basket which gives them a better transaction. I think that is my reading. My reading of Bangladesh communication, Bangladeshis consuming communication is like they consume popular culture. Bangladeshis retain a lot of narratives, but at the end of the day, and this come up time and again, if you do a research and ask them what brand this was about, you usually draw a blank. Remember the story, but not remember the brand. So it's communication or advertising has always been like a substitute for popular culture. They look for, which is why large format ads worked in Bangladesh first, then came to India. But people used to love watching a 1 minute, 2 minute long ad because that told the story a little better. At the end of the day, what brand told you the story? I'd replace a brand with anything.
But I think that's okay what you say. But I think when you come to a saying plain and say that actually, if I'm delivering well, if I'm delivering the product well in the right price point, and I'm more socially good, and everything else is ceteris paribus, then I'll prefer the brand which is more socially good. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I'm saying that if when
I think what's happened here, I think what, again, 2020 sort of sped up was the reality that there are so many brands. One of you guys said earlier on, now we have so many choices, it's a pain, right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, we're all old enough to remember when there was only Coke, or there was only Pepsi. There wasn't Coke and Pepsi, or there wasn't 50 different colas, right? But what's happened now is it's sped up this thing that if you're not responsible, you're going to get caught so quickly, right? Yeah. And so it's not talking about the fact you're responsible is a bit like the guy who goes to the pub and says to everybody, I'm a really cool guy, right? Nobody really believes it, right? So talking about how responsible you are is like, what are you hiding?
Exactly.
But not being responsible will get found out very quickly.
Very fast.
Yeah, and so brands, I think there is a role for brands very strongly. I think there's the nature way in which they have to communicate things now has to be much more deep-seated. And they've got to make sure that it's much more, it can't be just what you're going to see in a 30-second commercial.
Oh, yes.
It's going to be what you're going to see in the bigger context, right?
Number one. Number two, also what you said, it's very important where, the audience, you don't want to, today in the new era of new impressionism, you don't want to see around with a brand which is not really cool anymore. You don't want that anymore. You use a brand which is not really okay. It's not okay for your image as well. How can you use this? Because I think that's where the whole game is. It's a new community thing as well. Let's talk about the community. Even from a community perspective, you need to use brands which are actually the right brands to use. And of course, it cannot be a faff. Then faff is been caught very, very soon.
Yeah, I think what's interesting there, Shaon, is if you go back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I mean, this last week was Cannes week, right? There was no Cannes festival this year.
God. Tell me about it, man.
Bad luck for you, buddy, because I know you now expect to go there and win awards every year now, right? So
not only that, I'm missing south of France as well.
Yeah, of course. But it was a reminder, if you think about it, because the people that run the Cannes Festival, had a whole week of running videos, live video feeds, and lots of really interesting speeches and presentations. But what's really interesting is, I first went to Cannes, I think, 20 years ago. And to be honest, the first time I went, I thought it was a con job. It was a bunch of guys all dressed in black, talking to themselves, watching 30-second commercials, right?
True.
And it was like, to me, it seemed, you got to remember, I was new to the industry. I had been a public servant, and I go to Cannes and I'm thinking, these are the least creative people I've ever met. They all dress the same. They all wore black all the time. No offense, guys. But, and But it was that sort of moment, you know. The first time I went to Carmen, I went into the whatever the big hall was called. I can't remember what it's called, right? And like, I remember distinctly. I had like a patterned shirt on. There might have been 1,000 people in there, and 995 had black T-shirts on. It was like ridiculous, right? But the thing that has really struck me this year in watching some of those videos and thinking about it is that today, when I'm asked to work with clients on a brand strategy, on a new communication strategy, we spend as much or more time thinking about what are we doing outside of mainstream advertising as we do inside.
Yes.
Because in the old days, cool was, oh, you've got a TV commercial everybody likes. Today, cool is a whole bunch of things connected to who's using it, how it's being used, how it's being developed.
It's a project. Today it's about project.
It's also an experience, whole experience.
Backstory. It's you know, a very complicated process. And so, you know, when I think about it now, what you're talking about is, if I think about going forward, that younger population around the world, what they're going to take out of this year is the new normal will be that all the things we thought might happen are reality, right?
Yeah.
And messaging, therefore, has to be, as you said at the beginning, Shaon, contextualized in a different sort of way.
Oh, yes, big time.
Jeremy, what's a good example? Jeremy's back, so I'm just going to ask you a question.
Welcome back, Jeremy.
Yeah, it's all right, man. And the other new normal is things drop out.
I hate technology.
Right? Yeah. Mate, what's a good example of something you've seen that you think people ought to be thinking about? Like, what's a brand or a communication people ought to be thinking about as an example?
Sorry, because you just dropped out. Did you say what is a brand or communication people should be thinking about?
Yeah, what's a good example of the way in which brands have reacted or could be doing stuff?
Oh, okay. Look, I think, do you remember a little boy, age 5, saying, as he answered the senior executive of a major American beverage company, who said, where would you like us to be? And the little kid said, pretty much, be where I need you when I want you, but don't be where I can find you every day. My best friend does that. And so that was a wake-up call to the world's biggest beverage brand, that you can't expect to be everything to everyone just because you think so.
Absolutely.
So when I look at brands these days, they're not what they used to be 5 years ago. They are very much now a thing that has earned its right to be in my life because you've passed my levels of requirement. And so from a health perspective, more and more people now are more conscious about the health ramifications or the health for themselves when they buy a car or they buy fruit.
Absolutely.
A car has to have all the safety features. The airbag has to be in the right place. The whole thing's being dictated to by a health message because my family's important and I'm important. My fruit, I need to know where that was grown, where it was picked, how it was prepared, and how it was brought here and displayed. And while it's on display, what are you doing to ensure it stays clean, let alone the labeling of products? So now the scrutiny of a brand has never been more under the microscope than it is now. Never before, and we're listening, we're going on right now, COVID, and that's just part of a shitload of stuff that's in the air. It just happens to be the one that's top of mind. But peanuts, when I was a kid, was never regarded as an allergy. In fact, I don't think we knew about food allergies when I was a kid. Diabetics weren't part of the conversation, but they are now. And if you look at all the chemicals being pumped into animals so that we can eat them, that we eventually consume, I immediately look at a horrific image of a bird I saw, National Geographic, and I think it might have been a tern, and it was dead on the stand in the Galapagos, I think, and its belly was wide open, and it was full of brilliant, colourful things. It looks gorgeous, but they're plastics. And those plastics are exactly like the toxins that we eat when we have a McDonald's hamburger or we drink a can of carbonated soft drink. The chemicals coming into our life are causing horrific ramifications. So now the microscope from the everyday consumer is focused on what's good for me and my family. And so the role of the brand, the product, is no longer the product name. It's the brand that looks after me, has my respect, and it better be better tomorrow than it was today, because it's something out there already that's going to replace it. So the fickleness of the consumer has never been more, I guess, on alert. And although some people will say, this is my brand, I love it, but I will always look over here for something new just to keep my brand on its toes. And just at that point, I'll just make this comment, and I forget the chairman's name, but he was running Kraft about 10 years ago at a conference, and he said, I don't understand why I have an advertising agency and a PR group and a research company at great expense to my shareholders when I'm inundated by my customers sending me their letters of approval, disapproval, and suggestions to better my brand. Meaning all of you people here, not you guys, but this audience is talking to, who I employ to make my brands better, are behind my consumer. You're not with them and you're not ahead of them. And it was Steve Jobs that said our job is to provide the thing that they don't know they need but can't do without tomorrow, and have that ready for them today. And I think, in essence, is pretty much what a brand has to do these days, because the expectancy level is so high now.
Hey, we gotta finish up in a few minutes. So I just want to get, if I could get each of you guys to just give me the one line or the one sentence, right? So think about this. There's a bunch of people I know that are watching this through our Facebook feed, etc. A lot of them are mostly from Bangladesh. A lot of them are client side, brand managers, people like that. If you're going to talk to a brand manager tomorrow or Monday or whenever, the next day you're actually doing some real work, guys, and you've got to give them the one line of advice of what they've got to think about in terms of planning communication for the next 6 months. What's that one line of advice you would give a brand manager, regardless of the brand and the category? Anybody want to go take a go at that?
I'll say, because I'll say, for me, in the elevator, I tell the client, be relevant, be really relevant to your client, to your consumer.
Yep. Yeah.
For me, I think
be relevant. Is irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think for me, I said that the first thing I told already, that the context is in the foreground now. So you have to be contextual. The COVID is the context, number one. Number two, what we discussed just before a few minutes back, I think Jeremy actually echoed my point. It's actually about how that's a social business. Your business itself is a social business. Accept that fact and do your best, because consumer will question you 20, 27 times, 30 times before they buy you, because they know so much today. You cannot hide behind anything. So be every business is a social business for you. Accept that fact and deal with it.
Yeah. Very good. KC.
My thing would be to, I would tell them that really find out what benefit your consumer is getting from the brand, because that might be changing. You might be thinking that I'm delivering benefit A, the consumer is probably seeking benefit B. Be very clear on what the consumer wanting, not exactly what you're delivering. It's very, very important. There better not be any mismatch between those two. And once that happens, your brand is irrelevant.
Good point. Faiyaz, what's your advice?
I think the brand needs to now communicate and be honest, actually, give an honest opinion, actually. Because as from the discussion, what I saw is that, in Bangladesh, people are now very confused with so many informations, different kind of information. So if a brand is honest at this point of time, which is very much important for people to understand.
Yeah. Everything you guys have just said, my mantra that I write about, I've talked about for years is what matters matters. And realistically, all of us in the agency side of the business, client side of the business, the only thing you've got to focus on is what matters to the people you're trying to get to use your brand, right? And the problem is most of us live in a bubble. You know, we're a upper middle class, pretty well off, work in an industry, talk together, work together, and our clients are the same, and we've got to see through the bubble and figure out what matters to the people. So relevance, context, exactly what you guys are all talking about. That's the key to it. And hopefully that also involves people just having to think about what their brand stands for and how it doesn't have to be serious, right? It's serious when it's supposed to be serious. It's helpful when it needs to be helpful. Maybe sometimes the best thing you can do is grab those memes that KC mentioned at the beginning of the conversation and or some of the stuff that Jeremy was talking about he sees on YouTube. Go back, find out what people are laughing about, what they're singing to, and figure out how you can, you know, help bring that to life through your brand or help people reach it more. Good stuff, lads. Thank you very much. I know, I've got to make sure that next time we do this, we actually have a woman on here or I'm going to get criticised. Although, Jeremy, maybe you can. No, anyway.
Thank you so much.
We've done our hour, guys. Thanks very much. We're going to get back together soon and have another session and get you all back on screen together, okay? I'll talk to you all separately very soon. Thanks very much for your help. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers.